So CDFI Friendly America created the Future of CDFI series to encourage conversations about topics, issues, and questions that CDFI practitioners and allies are wrestling with, and some that they should be wrestling with. Since January, we've talked about the seismic forces reshaping community development finance and the CDFI industry in particular. We've talked about the factors eroding the essential role that the Community Reinvestment Act plays in our communities and on behalf of CDFIs. And last month, we had a wonderful conversation about consolidation as a growth strategy in the CDFI space. Artificial intelligence might be the most future focused topic we could present if it weren't for the fact that AI is already here, already in our work, already changing our ideas about community development finance, and already evolving so fast that most of us have trouble keeping up. AI makes it easy to compare, combine, and contrast multiple data sets in less time than it took me to say this sentence. AI can produce a customized summary for you of, say, a congressional hearing about the CDFI fund and include background biographies for all the witnesses, key data on CDFI lending in congressional districts, and related reference materials. It can show you many ways to extend your social media reach, to extend your digital footprint. And for the CDFI industry, at least as much for other industries, I'd suggest, there isn't a lot that AI can't do or couldn't do. Whether we wanted to do those things, though, and how we want to do them, raises all sorts of questions for CDFIs. Will CDFI lending become less personal? Can banks and other mainstream lenders, including predatory lenders, use AI to target borrowers that CDFIs want to serve, reducing and reshaping our market and our impact? And a question I hear a lot, will AI eliminate CDFI jobs? To discuss these questions today in the next hour and to raise still more questions, we have an exceptional panel of innovative CDFI leaders with expertise and vision about AI and CDFIs. Saurabh Narain is president and CEO of the National Community Investment Fund, a 30-year-old CDFI intermediary financing community banks, small businesses, and local development. Through its NCIF Innovation Labs, a research and technology hub, NCIF is focused on integrating AI, machine learning, and data sources to advance smarter lending, investing, and advocacy. Bulbul Gupta is president and CEO of Pacific Community Ventures, a CDFI and impact investor advancing a restorative capital strategy focused on micro and small businesses to advance economic mobility. PCV is building out the Radiant Data Hub to democratize data and AI for CDFIs. In addition, in August 2025, Pacific Community Ventures published a policy governing the responsible and ethical use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we will begin our program today with Ruth Barber of Fund Consulting and the Fund Community Institute. Ruth is going to release to us new survey results on CDFIs and AI from an industry-wide survey the Fund Community Institute has conducted over the past month or more. First, though, I want to tell you what to expect in the next 55 minutes or so. We're going to start with a simple Zoom poll for you to complete to help our panelists know just a little bit more about how much experience you have with AI, just to help us start with some assumptions. Then Ruth will frame our discussion with the Fund Institute's results, followed by Saurabh and Bulbul. We aim to leave 10 or 15 minutes for audience questions, and I just want to remind you again, please put your questions in the chat at any time. And if you preface your question with a capital Q, we're more likely to see it. In addition, at the very end of our call, for those of you who are interested in continuing the discussion about AI and CDFIs, we will give you a link in the chat about after the Q&A that you can use to sign up for small group discussions that we're going to organize next Thursday, May 16th. Last month, we tested these small group discussion groups, and they proved very successful and really fruitful. And at the end of our hour today, we will share with you the topic for our May Zoom event in CDFI Friendly America's The Future of CDFIs series. So with all that, let's get started. Bree, can I ask you to please open the survey asking participants to share their experience with AI? So if you would just take a minute to give us your answers, we'll get a sense of who you are in the AI world. Well, looks like it's pretty consistent. There's some moderate users, some a little more, some a little less. I think that's everybody. Well, not quite everybody. All right. So with those data sort of totaling up now, let's turn to Ruth. Can we tell us or what we're seeing here in these data consistent with what you learned in your survey?
That was such a pregnant pause, wasn't it? I apologize. Okay. Bree, have I done it?
Yes, we can see it. If you want to
Okay.
hit the present though, or the
You, you,
slideshow view.
Yeah.
you're at the end of your slides though. I don't know how much you're planning to use. So
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. So thank you, everybody. I am Ruth Barber. I'm just going to say a couple words about Fund Community Institute in case anybody, this is your first time hearing about it. But we have been around for about 8 years. We produce research on the CDFI industry, make it all publicly available. The purpose is to have actionable research for practitioners and for industry stakeholders. We love to work with partners in the industry and have worked with CARSI and the CDFI Women's Network, Credit Builders Alliance, and are currently working on a research plan with the Minnesota CDFI Coalition to sort of document the response to the ICE operations in Minnesota. So the purpose of this really was to get a take on where we are, um, where the industry is, to do a snapshot of where we are with AI in the industry. So last month we did a survey. We had 104 CDFIs respond. As you can see from the first slide, they are largely what we in the industry might say more mature CDFIs, slightly larger asset size, more than 16 years in business. About 70% were loan funds, 10% banks, and the others were stakeholders, other stakeholders, foundations, intermediaries, other types of organizations. And one finding that we did think was interesting to mention is that we did get significant feedback from CDFIs that they felt reluctance to respond, either because of their lack of understanding about AI or maybe a lack of understanding of what their organization was actually doing with AI. So, perhaps something that orients us in some way to, how people are feeling about AI. There are 6 areas in here that the findings cover. I am going to move lightning fast to go through these so that we have enough time for all the presentations and the discussion. So I'm just going to be highlighting some of them. So first off, in terms of AI tool adoption, probably unsurprisingly, it is ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot that sort of dominate people's routine usage. Um, Only 21% say that they're already working with a vendor or a consultant on something AI related. And right now, most of the usage is for back office and general activities like research, productivity, marketing, and very few indicated that they were already using AI for underwriting or loan docs or other sort of core mission purposes. We also asked the CDFIs to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, and they came up with a 3, which we categorize as early adopters. But the largest cluster of 35% did rate themselves a 1. So again, sort of another way to orient how people at CDFIs are feeling about their relationship with AI. And then in terms of data readiness, somewhat limited. More than half are saying that their data is siloed or fragmented, that they don't yet have data or analytics teams. Although they are more than half saying they do have data governance policies. So perhaps an indication that there is, some sort of infrastructure being built, and that is out there, and certainly an area of future research to look into that. terms of general attitudes and beliefs, there's definitely some optimism about AI's potential in terms of how it will improve borrower outcomes, and in particular, how they think it might help TA clients. There's a lot more uncertainty around the potential for bias and ethical alignment, mission alignment, those types of things. About half the respondent pool chose neutral responses in those, indicating to us that they're unsure of where that's going and what they actually feel or how that might end up looking. In terms of resources and readiness, somewhat the same picture. In terms of the data readiness, that about half have a budget and/or staff to implement AI, they think responsibly, and about half, again, have policies for evaluating the tools for adoption. So I think that, again, the rudimentary infrastructure is definitely indicated that it's going to be that it is being put in place. Very high demand for training. All the training areas had at least half, as you can see, and most in sort of those beginning areas of understanding the capabilities and limitations and the technical implementation. So essentially, key takeaways are that it's in the early and exploratory stages. It's being used for sort of operational back end things more than the core functioning at this point. And while there's a lot of optimism about the potential that it might bring to the CDFI industry, there also are significant gaps in terms of the readiness and budgets, staffing resources, training. So lots of areas that, for development within the industry that hopefully, the next speakers can speak to. I know that I went lightning fast through that, but Mark and Bree had asked me to do 5 minutes, and I'm now at 6 minutes, 17 seconds. But I very much like to stay on time. So if anyone has questions, after this and you want to email me directly or you want to go to our website, everything will be released on our website and on our social media. And so I will now turn it over to Sarab and let him jump off from here.
Thank you, Ruth. So, there we go.
Takes me a minute, please hold.
All right, we hear you.
All right. Okay, 1 second. Why would you do it?
There you go.
Very good. Excuse me for a second. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I want to begin by thanking Mark, CDFI Friendly America, for hosting this really exciting series, and then more importantly on this AI subject. I think it's for the benefit of the sector that Mark, you and your team are doing a fantastic job. Also want to thank our panelists, Ruth, Bulbul, Sachi, and for their work in this space, and love to sort of collaborate here. So who are we? We are a 30-year-old CDFI and impact investor. We've deployed about $550 million in the market, worked with 50 community banks, with them, through them, in about 34 states. We started thinking about impact measurement back in 2007. And as part of our innovation labs, we sort of continued to develop this artificial intelligence-based platform. And I want to thank my team, many of whom are part of this webinar just now, for helping enable the sector, to helping enable the CDFI sector, the impact investing sector, so that we can increase more capital in underserved communities nationally. Slowly and steadily, we'll go beyond artificial intelligence to machine learning, to blockchain technologies as appropriate. Over the last 6-8 months, we've also interviewed many of our partner banks, and we have created what is called the CEO Perspectives initiative, which is there on the website, Uh, and that's part of our effort to sort of think about new ways of looking at the future given the changing environment. The question that Mark raised was, is AI for CDFIs? And so thought I'll start with my overarching thoughts. It is absolutely going to catalyze CDFIs and impact investors, raise and deploy capital, and increase resilience of underserved communities. If there's any trepidation, it should be removed because AI is a tool which will help us do a lot more in these communities. The fact too is data and data analytics will get democratized. And smaller institutions and larger institutions will all be able to do a lot more with their data, with their judgment and intuition, which is the third most important point on the question of jobs and our ability to deliver, Mark. I believe that technology will enhance human judgment and intuition. We'll be able to not only make our operations efficient, increase the productivity in individuals, and target communities that most need interventions and create benchmarks. At the end of the day, we are working with scarce subsidies so that we should be able to evaluate ourselves on the efficacy of our work. So as an opportunity, it is absolutely imperative that we make it part of our DNA. And Ruth, thank you for your work. Many more people are thinking about it, and it's got to be incorporated as a DNA. But one of the follow-on subjects, Mark, that we should talk about, and I believe you mentioned, or somebody mentioned, that Bulbul may have done some work on the principles, but we have to take the bull by the horns and think about principles of responsible AI for CDFIs. Because, whether it's hallucinations, whether it's bias, whether it's misuse by predatory lenders, we have to take control of that activity. It's something that we can talk about down the line. So as we think about the life cycle, this is a very simplified life cycle of a lending, investing activity at CDFI banks. What do? We do some analytics. We sort of say, okay, I'm based in Chicago. Where should I put money to work? Well, PolicyMap and many others are doing some work of this thing, but can we identify geographies and figure out quickly where we should put the money? And I believe AI and AI tools and agents will help do that quickly. But then go on to the next stage. We say, we can identify that we like to put money in the south side of Chicago. Are there other areas that are similar, quote unquote, to Chicago in Oakland? And how do you identify that quickly? So identification is a tool in our mind, which can benefit from technology for that. We can identify projects and investment products. As I said earlier, this is also focused on investors. How do you put money to work in communities and areas where it can be most impactful? Underwriting for risk, return, and impact. I often use a tacky term called IRR. Most finance and banking people will say IRR stands for internal rate of return. We call it impact, risk, and return. And it's a way of focusing attention on the fact that our optimization equation has to include impact in addition to risk and return. Documentation, it's not strictly AI, it's blockchain. Smart contracts will be used all day long for documentation for so many of our transactions. Payments, stable coins are going to be in the future. It's again blockchain. It's not AI, but it will be used, and we might as well get ready for adopting stable coins or other technologies for the benefit of the sector. We can build portfolios and scenario analysis. We are testing tools where we create a portfolio which has put $10 million in a project. It creates, let's call it 1,000 jobs. That's too many, but let's call it 1,000 jobs. You add another $1 million to that portfolio. In Chicago versus Oakland in that example, where is the differential? And that scenario analysis can be done very quickly by AI tools. Portfolio management and risk management, which again, it can augment human intuition. CDFI fund investor reporting, once you have the portfolio in the cloud, it's not difficult to do TLRs and AMS reporting. It's also not difficult to do investor reporting. This is sort of basic tools in artificial intelligence, which once you put the portfolio in the cloud, the AI tools can make that happen very quickly. So this is a very simplified, internally focused life cycle of a CDFI that can be done very quickly. So I ask myself the what if questions. So yes, there are many tools in the market which can identify communities. Can we identify that at a granular level, census tract, county, state, in 30 seconds, 5 seconds? Can we find comparable areas of distress? Can we run correlation and longitudinal analysis on social determinants of health? Very difficult to do on a regular basis, but if we had a tool which can actually put all the market information in it, we would be in a great situation to handle that analysis quickly. Can we create benchmarks for investing? Now, that is a function of a network effect that we can have. And another conversation that, Mark, we should have is how can we create a network where people contribute data and the portfolio such that we can all benefit from that? Can we do OCRs of text to better understand trends? Can we create maps of political representatives? You talked about congressional maps. And can it be updated on a regular basis? To me, that's an important aspect. To create reports. We're working with a couple of potential customers and saying they want these reports on a quarterly basis. Uh, it is possible for people to do it, but can we do it in a minute amount of time relative to others, relative to what the current situation is? That's the vision and the aspiration. And what we're trying to do is to focus on the tools and come out in a true software style in versioning. Yeah. So here's a vision that we have where we'll have a natural language interface. People will type questions in English language, just like ChatGPT. And we'll have four sources of data: public structured, public unstructured, which is like reports, private structured, private unstructured. And our vision is that we'll have data utility in the cloud, which can collect, clean, connect. So at this point in time, we have 30 years of data which has already been connected and collected. It has been geocoded, census data, FDIC, summary of deposits, financial information, HMDA data, all of that's been collected thanks to our team and geocoded, and is now available for trend analysis, for correlation analysis, for efficiencies, and provide this platform as a tool, uh, for CDFIs to enable the plan, to make this an enabling platform where we'll have information available to folks to use. So this is just a sneak preview of our platform, which if you have a view, if you have an interest, we can demo that and at some stage. But Bank Impact is our first tool that's coming out where you can search any institution in the country for the last 30 years on their HMDA lending, on their bank branches, on the financials. That's all available. It's been cleaned up. It's available in natural language. So my effort, and I mentioned this to Mark and Bree, thank you, Bree, is to try to create an informal working group. So if anybody is interested in participating in that group to collect, contribute data, to become beta users, to standardize taxonomies, please click on this QR code and put some information in it. So I'm hoping that many people will contribute and for the benefit of the sector. I'm going to stop there,
Great.
Mark. I put a timer alarm for myself and it just rang. So
It was perfect. That was great. A lot of content, lots of good comments and questions, which you can look over as as Bobo takes the microphone, and we'll get into this in conversation later. Thank you so much, Bobo.
thank you.
Thank you. I know Bree's gonna, oh, thanks, Bree. Appreciate it. Next, please. So before I go into the AI conversation, I'm Bulbul Gupta. I'm President and CEO for PCV, as Mark mentioned earlier. I want to talk just a little bit about our CDFI model and why then we went on a technology and AI journey that brought us to this conversation. So first off, if we think about the fact that in our restorative capital strategy that we launched a few years ago, we're really first and foremost making sure that we center what we call restorative capital, i.e. impact first capital, marrying for PCV our origin stories of both being one of the country's first impact investment funds, launched in the late 90s, and the fact that we then became a CDFI to do micro and small business lending across the state of California. So, how do we marry that impact first, civil rights centered mission into how we show up? How do we decolonize our capital? How do we democratize access to affordable capital, mentorship programs, research, advocacy? And in that measurement process, how do we better tell our story of are we having wealth building and economic mobility outcomes through our capital and mentorship, good jobs work combined, is really where our deeper journey beyond just sort of lending analytics and lending software improvements, processes, workflows came from. So, impact underwriting to impact measurement, I would say, is where a lot of this journey you're about to see came from. Next. I joined about 6.5 years ago, and about 4.5 to 5 years ago, as we were really redoing the strategy and deepening how do we tell that outcome story of economic mobility, we brought in Sachi, who was at the time starting Radiant Data as a tech and AI startup, but whose background, similar to mine, was in microfinance, impact measurement, and really measuring for good jobs outcomes into PCV as a data partner to help us redo our technology stack, our technology roadmap, as you see here. And there's sort of three major buckets that I'm going to touch on of where we then started to not only improve our technology stack and our data governance, but now in terms of the last few years, building AI out into PCV's work. So one was really in, as I mentioned, the data analytics work to get to the impact measurement piece. The next was in how we use a voice AI app I'm about to talk about to collect qualitative feedback from our good jobs, our workers in our small business clients. How do we then, second, how do we apply it to learn more and more about what has worked historically in PCV's own loan data, and be able to better and better design a predictive model trained on PCV's own loan data? And third, how do we then democratize access to data operations, analytics, and this work across the field? Next. At the time, it took us about 2 or 3 years to really redo our technology stack, redo what we meant in our data governance protocols, our cybersecurity work. And when we were really working in our internal working group to get to those outcomes, we also published last summer, at the time that we announced PCV's 2030 strategy and the acquisition of the Radiant Data and AI startup, our ethical AI policy, so that we are very clear both for staff inside PCV, board members, investors, partners, and for any CDFIs or others we might partner with, what they can expect from us as far as how we will or will not use technology or AI tools in particular. And including just a couple of highlights here. We're not, using technology or AI software to do away with decision making. Lending decision making and other decision making still sits with the humans in our staff who are trained along our mission, our values, our work. It is really meant to mostly speed up and support their ability to get to those decisions, which we'll talk about in a minute. No PII data going into cloud or AI tools. So there's sort of a variety, and you can see more detail at the link here. But just wanted to make sure I say that because it's important to remain a balance of AI optimist, pragmatist, skeptical. I spent 2 years at an AI think tank before I came into PCV. And when we think about the worrying uses of AI to accelerate harm in criminal justice, lending, hiring, education, decision making in the world, we want to be really cautious that we're not just bringing in algorithms or models trained on what has been seen as successful in the outside traditional finance industry, which would quickly disrupt the whole point of having a CDFI industry, right? So we want to make sure that we're really holding ourselves accountable to that. Next. So one of the things that I wanted to also just reset us around is when we think about the different ways that mission-driven partners would think about AI in their operations, what type of AI are we thinking about, right? Different problems call for different solutions. So the core foundation of any of our good models is going to be clean, reliable, repeatable data sets and data. How we then stack everything else on top of that. So any organization is going to venture as high on the pyramid as you desire, but also are have capacity for, right? And aligned with what problems you're looking to solve, what you're struggling with, and where you may need to then invest in solutions to get you to those. So it's something we find useful, as Saurabh shared earlier in his model, to really think about what are the problems with what are the solutions in technology and AI tools. Next. So one of the things that I referenced earlier was one of the first journeys we really took with Sachi's team in baking in use of AI into our work was in our national good jobs work with low and moderate income entrepreneurs and workers. How do we get qualitative feedback from workers who may or may not have English as their first language, who may or may not be easy to reach, particularly when small businesses rare to, it's rare for them to have HR people or resources. And this ICA app, and ICA means to listen in one of the Indian languages, is able to collect voice-based feedback from any worker in any major language spoken in the world on a few different prompts to really help us understand what their feeling of job quality in a business is. And that not only allows us to capture their sentiment analysis, how they're feeling about those answers, also allows us to give synthesized feedback back to those small business owners to say, hey, you may or may not have your own HR or multiple language surveys, but your representative group of workers is giving you this feedback where you might be thinking about improving job quality in a business. It gets to expensive retirement benefits. They might be saying, hey, I could really use predictive scheduling, paid time off for sick days, and helps them stay on a good jobs journey, but get actual voice-based feedback from their own workers. And that bottom link is an article we've published around that worker voice research recently. Next. And the other model, and this is what we're going to talk a little bit more about, we started last summer with Accessity, and then we trained PCVs. How do we actually get to supporting staff within CDFIs to get to yes faster and get to no faster and or spend more time on the maybes to get to yes? If our goal is to try to get to yes with as many underserved entrepreneurs as we can, to really try to disrupt the harm that has been done in the financial system and the industry we're meant to solve for, how do we support more of our staff to be able to deploy capital faster while meeting our goals and our missions? And so the team actually did this with Accessity, a Southern California-based CDFI first. And then we finished training PCVs last summer or last fall. Next. And I'll just pause there at this slide while I say a couple of things about sort of what it took for PCV to get to this stage, particularly. For us, it really took to get to about 1,000 loan volume, like historical transactions, in order to be able to train this model with a high enough confidence score. And again, I want to caution with a couple of things. So over the last 5 or 6 years, while we have tripled our loan portfolio across the state of California, we have also been able to deploy about 90% of our capital over those 5 years to one, low and moderate income communities, and two, to underserved entrepreneurs. And so if we're really thinking about how do we train not only PCV's own model, but an industry model representative of more and more CDFIs, on inclusive loan data that we're proud of, right? Not bringing in models from outside in traditional finance, but intentionally disrupting and innovating from the data sitting in our own organizations up, that is really going to be able to help us to actually get to a national, getting to yes and deploying and meeting the needs for entrepreneurs faster. So this is what it would look like for you as a CDFI and lending team. This is what our lending team would see when they log on to Impact Lend, to be able to actually see their own historical portfolio and run their own new deals against it, which our team is just starting to do in Q1. Next, just have 2 more slides, and then I will also pause for Q&A. And so What we're doing now, and we announced this in October, and we can talk a little bit more about this, is taking the data, the model impact lend that you've seen work with a couple of other CDFIs already, into the launch of the industry's first data commons model, where we're bringing in about 10 to 12 CDFIs now, small business CDFIs to start with for the first cohort, to be able to actually all contribute de-identified data into a national database, where we would train a nationally representative algorithm on this inclusive loan data sitting within our group of CDFIs. So we have about 5 to 6 signed and committed already, and we're looking for about 5 to 6 more through the conversations we're having. Happy to answer more questions, and we can certainly do a demo separately for those who are interested in looking through what impact lend would look like for their CDFI and for the group. But with that, you would get support in both dedicated data team and AI team, machine learning engineer hours, as well as the point being to learn together as a field, as a cohort, what is each of us doing to accelerate our ability to get to yes, trained on our missions and values. Next slide, please. Last one. And so the goal would really be for each of us to get to a platform that kind of looks like this as a mock-up of our demo, to be able to see not only how your lending decisions compare to your own data, but also to this nationally representative group of CDFIs that would come into this data commons model and help you build your team's confidence in getting to yes, benchmark your data, give you portfolio level insights. And for all of us as a field to not only be able to learn together, but accelerate getting to yes across our communities better, especially in this time where it's that much more important to keep access to capital affordable as well as accessible. I'm going to pause there. Happy to take Q&A and leave some good, healthy time for discussion.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you. So we're going to go to Q&A. We got lots of questions and lots to talk about. Perhaps you've had a chance to look while we were going through the conversations. I want to invite Sachi Shinoy, if I'm saying your name correctly, Sachi. I apologize if I'm not, to the conversation. Sachi is the Chief Data Officer for Pacific Community Ventures. So I'm going to start with a question that no one quite asked, but that it occurs to me. How much is the goal here? Bulbul, you're talking about a sort of a common data set that allows, I think, many implementations off of that or around that, but maybe that's not right. And Saurabh, you're talking about creating some common sort of methodologies, I think. Are we talking about sort of layers of AI implementation in terms of underwriting and in terms of credit risk, in terms of portfolio management? Or are we really talking about seeing if we can't come to one common standard in CDFI lending? And I'll ask that for Bulbul or
Oh,
Saurabh.
sorry, I wasn't sure who you were asking that for
Yeah.
Saurabh. So I think for now we're trying to make sure that we're training this. Yes, of course, each CDFI that contributes data, we're looking for about ideally a minimum of 1,000 transactions per CDFI. So we just got to that last year ourselves, to be able to train a nationally representative model. I think it would help you to be able, because in the demo you can kind of see how it helps you to understand what are the expected write-off rates, what are the expected other insights you would gain from being able to see this across the group. And if we're looking at, what is the confidence score? If you put in a new loan, this model would say yes to 85% of the time that this loan is going to get repaid. Maybe it's 75% of the time, maybe it's 90%. So depending on what your internal, thresholds or hurdles are, the point is to help train more lending staff, more CDFI staff and leaders to be able to see across the field and get to yes faster with more confidence. And it generates insight so that it's really got what we call behavioral nudges designed into the demo platform. So that with each page that you're looking at, it's also generating things for you and your team to be thinking about that might give you more insight across the group than with just your own data or one specific loan.
Great, thank you. Saurabh, what do you?
Right. So our vision is that there are two kinds of data, public and private, right? everybody's trying to sort of clean up, do an extract, transform, and load ETL on these things and make it available. So one of our core efforts is to collect a lot of the public data and make it available in the cloud, almost as a data utility. Uh, Second is private data. People are cagey about giving private data. So we are tackling that up front. We're saying, we will create silos for you to host your private data such that you can now interact with the public database that we have and make decisions.
Mhm.
Our effort today is to do more data analytics, portfolio construction and scenario analysis, and then productivity increases. So how do I do things better, faster, cheaper? Our effort is not today to underwrite transactions.
Mhm.
And I say that because, there are a lot of people who are touching that field of underwriting of different kinds of transactions. In fact, there was a question here in the chat that said, if you're training for small business, how do you train for housing? So I think over a period of time, we learn from that, and eventually we'll get to underwriting different kinds of products and geographies. So our effort just now is to enable the sector with analytics.
Yeah, thank you. The other question that's out there, someone put up there is, at what point do you feel like you're creating a scoring model, right? And are you getting away from the personal part of underwriting? And I think that's baked in, but I'd love to hear a little bit of thinking about that. Maybe Sachi, if you have some thoughts on that.
Yes, I'd love to come in on this one. So, yes, in some ways it is a scoring model, but remember, this is something that we are designing to augment the underwriter's decisions, not replace. And so I really want to double click on something that Bobo touched on in one of the slides, which is to say that the way we set up our machine learning models is to help fast track approvals, those applications that are just slam dunks that just check all the boxes. We can get those to approvals faster. It also helps fast track the ones that are very, very obvious no's that just fall way short of fulfilling any of our risk criteria. What that does is it really helps free up the underwriter to focus on the middle cases, the ones that might be a little bit more on the fence, where we need much more of that human judgment and much more of that human interaction with the applicants to say, okay, for example, your revenue has been a little volatile. Can you just tell me a little bit more? Can you give me more context for that? And then spend more time on getting those to yes, right? And so think about the scores that our models produce as more of an indication, more directional rather than definitive.
Thanks. So Rob, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Sachi. Trying to put a number to whether it's a credit risk or impact risk analysis is fallacious, because there's so many factors, so much interdependencies, and we're talking about lives of human beings. Yeah. So what our effort is to create a spectrum of answers. In these situations, this is what's going to happen from an impact perspective. This is what has happened if you put money to work in a federally qualified health clinic, and the potential for grants to go away is that. So this is what could happen. Yeah. And we then, as I've said a few times in one of my slides, AI and machine learning, both predictive and analytical, would help in augmenting human judgment and intuition.
So let me ask another question, and then I promise I'm going to get back to some more of the questions that were asked you all brought them in, some more of the questions that were asked in the chat. Um, Both quantitative, which is the first one, and Bobo, you talked about the number of loans you want people to bring to the initial data hub. Does the CDFI industry generate enough data to be, is it enough to really make a meaningful output for them? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, what's the timeline here? When are you hoping to have these things, even out there for sort of broader test models? So just so we give everybody here a sense, because I don't know the answer to that, a sense of how long are we talking about?
Yeah, I'll touch on this, and Sachi, please jump in if to add. So two things. One, I think most CDFIs are sitting on far more data than they realize, or they probably realize and they don't know what to do with all of the data they're sitting on. That's been our experience with almost every CDFI we've talked to. And that was before the AI conversation, right? It was back when we were even talking about impact measurement the last few years and how we disaggregate data. How do we tell the story of our borrowers, our clients better? And two, so one, even if it takes about 1,000 loan volume to get to a high enough confidence in the model for any one CDFI, pre that, right, if you're more small and emerging than that, you can still be doing things on the technology roadmap that I shared that we were also doing before we got to the point where we had this transaction volume last year. So there are still a lot you can be doing on your technology stack, data cleanup, impact measurement, processes that gets you well set up for when you get to this point. Um, and then I'm so sorry, I forgot the second part of your second question,
How
but
long? What's the timing?
oh, yes, I'm sorry. We have about 5 or 6 CDFIs committed in the Commons model. PCV's own model is now trained, and our lending staff are starting to use it both against new loans. So we're just in beta mode in terms of our own model for our team to use. And then we will probably be soft launching the first cohort for this data commons model in Q2, probably around May, certainly by June. And I think by fall we will have the full cohort and the model ready, and some early insights to be able to share by the fall conference season.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
No, Saurabh, do you want to pick on
Yeah.
that question?
Yeah, the timing, our approach is to enable CDFI. So we're going one by one. And we've got customers who are saying, "Can you solve this problem for us?" And we'll solve the problem for them. We've gone to a CDFI, we've gone to investment fund, we're going to a fair lending organization who's saying, "Is ABC Bank doing enough in the communities that we care about?" Uh, we're going to research organizations. So we will do in a very sort of systematic manner what the customer really wants. And so uh, we are kind of ready for business from a beta perspective, not yet production ready, but we are beta ready. And the first part of the question I forgot.
The timing and the whether there are enough data out there, whether
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Even before we went down this AI journey, you know, one of my biggest peeves to our CDFI banks, CDFIs in general, was, man, these financial technology companies, and maybe there are some of them right here in this call, are using your data on the bank payments, cash flows of the customer and coming us those decisions. Why are you not using the same data? And why are there no more partnerships with the fintech companies to promote that idea? And to me, that data is there, and a lot of it is there. We only focus on sort of very high level transaction level. We got to go deeper into it.
Great, thank you. So let me go back to a more basic question for folks here. We saw there are a lot of folks who have a little experience with AI, not a lot. Is there a good source of data to compare different AI tools on data privacy and ethical issues and practices? I mean, is there somebody out there who looks at these things, including either of you?
I acquired the person that, well, we acquired the talent and the tech that we were leaning on for that. So I'm going to let Sachi answer that for us.
Great.
We have redesigned our entire tech stack with Sachi's team support. Go ahead, Sachi.
Yes, and I appreciate that, Bulbul. So the short answer to your question, Mark, is that no, there is no just ready source that I would recommend. I think one disservice that AI and tech in general have done, especially for the CDFI industry, if I can just be very frank, is that I think AI and tech has not done a good enough job of demystifying all the different tools and methodologies. And therefore, at this current time, it actually takes quite a bit of time and capacity from your internal chief technology officer or your chief data officer to have to keep up with the different companies, the different model releases, what are the pros and cons, looking at the evaluation metrics, which I and my team are always staying on top of. And I wish that there were better, more trusted resources out there to help us cut through that. But that is something we spent about 20% of our time on.
Yeah, so my a couple things about that. One is my thought then is that these you have the Data Hub cohort, and Saurabh, you're putting together a network of folks. These networks become critically important as a way, as so many other things in the CDFI world, as a way of sort of together coming to conclusions about ethical use and that sort of thing and practice. Let me ask.
Just
Go ahead, Saurabh.
just wanted to add one small thing. Uh, this question of privacy has been around for a while. We are coming at it, from the perspective that we will not, by state by policy. If you think about the legal situation in Europe versus the US, they started off with the law around the global privacy, whatever, GDPR or whatever it's called. Yeah. We're saying we don't want private data. And I think, Bulbul, you mentioned that you don't want personally identifying information. A, we don't want that. And B, we will never touch that by design. So, and so that's how we're starting, and we just want to allay that fear.
Yeah, so it's a matter of putting into use through AI the things that we already did in some ways, or the values we already adhere to. I think. Let me, Ruth, I want to come back to you because one of the big findings you had was about training. I'm guessing that the industry is not yet up to speed and being able to provide the training that it needs to help the CDFI industry and practitioners move along quickly. Do you have thoughts on what needs to happen in that training mode? And is it the networks and the cohorts that are already out there, or is there some other need/opportunity?
Yeah, that that for sure that was one of the findings and something that we're going to be doing a deeper dive on and following up with some of the respondents in terms of for those that have access training, where they access it, and other resources to make that available for CDFIs as well. But just to echo your point, Mark, I think a lot of it is going to come from people like Saurabh and Bulbul and Sachi and the partnerships, the networks, and I've been sitting here thinking that it would be amazing to get Sachi and Bulbul to document this process that they've gone through and what they've learned and make that available to other CDFIs to use, so that they can save the time for that.
Yeah, that's great.
We're working on it.
You're working on it. That's good. Yeah, no, I think that's great.
We have a lot of documentation for our board. We've been on this journey between cybersecurity, data, AI for a couple of years. Yeah, there's a lot.
That need to figure out how to put that training. There seems to be some urgency in that, and figuring out how do we jumpstart that is all I'm thinking about that. The one other question I want to ask, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to have to do wrap up because there's so many good questions. I didn't get to them all. Well, how do you factor in the fact that you have end users, prospective borrowers who are using AI as well? Does that make things easier, better, more complicated, different? Or even your partners, if they're, development services or other things like that. How do you factor that into your thinking about the use of AI within CDFIs? And we'll give it to anybody, but Saurabh, maybe you?
I strongly encourage that because, the world is changing, as I said in one of my opening slides. It's going to affect not only the CDFIs, but their customers. And if they become more efficient, we're not in the business of taking float. We're in the business of helping capital solutions,
Right.
We're in the business of reducing cost of documentation through smart contracts. So I strongly encourage that. In fact, I want people to adopt in some of the work that we're doing. We're telling them we will, perhaps give you some incentives for adopting technology. Not AI yet in that context, but adopting technology. So strongly encourage that.
Good. And any lightning quick thoughts, Sachi or Bulbul?
Yeah, just to add to that, I completely agree with Saurabh. I think we need to encourage it. One place that we have seen it being especially useful is when we are allowing people to provide feedback via their own voice. And so this really helps augment their applications. It helps really advance the conversations to get them to yes. And they find that it's so much more comfortable for them to do that and
Great.
share
Thank
that
you.
information and context with us.
Thanks. and I hate to be ending this conversation because we have lots more we could talk about, but I want to begin first of all by thanking our presenters. Ruth, thank you. Sarab, thank you. Bobo, thank you. Sachi, thank you. Thank you to all the participants who came and stayed. It's always a good sign when people stay around on a Zoom, and we're grateful for everybody who did that. Um, we will send out the materials via email to everybody who registered, including the several hundred people who didn't come in person, and many of whom will watch it on YouTube. And Bree Rose has posted the small group discussions link there for you can sign up if you want to join in small group discussions. I think I said that it was on May 8th. I don't know what month I said it was on May
16th, you
18th,
said.
but it's April 18th. So next week, or April, was it 16th? 16th.
April
I get it right.
16th.
My glasses don't allow me to do that. So thank you for that. And with our 1 minute left, Bree, if you can bring up the one other slide we have here. Our discussion next month in May will be on preparing for CDFI policy after Trump. We are necessarily engaged in some immediate and urgent things to do around the CDFI fund and other programs. But CDFIs are in an extraordinarily good position, I believe, to think about what they want to do. If you want to think about it as CDFI Project 2029, that's great. So we're gonna sort of start that conversation and see where that goes. And we invite you all to come back. We look forward to talking with you more and learning with you more. And I'll just say thank you for an hour very well spent. Thank you, everybody.